To the Supreme Lord, whose form is the embodiment of external existence, knowledge, and bliss, whose shark-shaped earrings are swinging to and fro, who is beautifully shining in the divine realm of Gokula, who, due to the offense of breaking the pot of yogurt that his mother was churning into butter, and then stealing the butter that was kept hanging from a swing, is quickly running from the wooden grinding motor in fear of Mother Yashoda, but who has been caught from behind by her who ran after him with great speed. To that Supreme Lord, Sri Damodara, I offer my humble obeisances.
Seeing the living stick in his mother's hand, he is crying and rubbing his eyes again and again with his two lotus hands. His eyes are filled with fear, and the necklace of pearls around his neck, with his mark of 3 lines like a conch shell, is shaking because of his quick breathing due to crying. To this Supreme Lord, Sri Damodara, whose belly is bound with ropes within his mother's pure love, I offer my humble obeisances.
By such childhood pastimes as this, he is drowning the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy, and is retreating to those devotees who are absorbed in knowledge of his supreme majesty and opulence, that is only conquered by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and is free from all conceptions of foreign reference. With great love, I again offer my obeisances to Lord Damodar hundreds and hundreds of times.
O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for the good of impersonal liberation, nor the highest liberation of eternal life, and Vaikuntha, nor any other good that may be obtained by executing the 9 processes of God. O Lord, I simply wish that this form of yours, as Balagopa, may never be manifest in my heart, for what is the use of unique or any other doing beside this?
O Lord, your lotus face, which is encircled by locks of soft black hair, touched with red, is kissed again and again on your shoulder, and your lips are reddish like the vimpa fruit. May this beautiful vision of your lotus face be ever manifest in my heart. Thousands and thousands of other benedictions are of no use to me.
O Supreme Lord, I offer my obeisances unto you, O Damodara, O Ananta, O Vishnu, O Master, O my Lord, be pleased upon me. By showering your glance of mercy upon me, deliver this poor ignorant fool who is immersed in an ocean of worldly sorrows, and become visible to my eyes.
O Damodara, this is true sense of forever, and Grivanara, who delivered from the curse of Narada and made it into great devotee by you. You hold as a baby child with rope to wooden grinding motor. In the same way, you keep your near and back. I only long for this, and have no desire for any kind of devotion.
Lord Damodar, I first of all offer my obeisance to the brilliant effulgent robe you find your belly, and then offer my obeisance to your belly, which is the abode of the entire universe. I humbly bow down to your most beloved Srimati Radharani, and I offer all obeisance to you, the Supreme Lord, who displays unlimited pastimes.
So, Hare Krishna, everyone. So, you're all very welcome to this wonderful, auspicious day of the Tirubhav, Disappearance Day of His Divine Grace, A.C Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki. So next what we'll do, we're having an Abhishek of Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. So everybody can turn and direct themselves towards Srila Prabhupada. We will have the Abhishek, followed by the Guru Puja.
Now
Hare
some wonderful cookies, and have these arranged for the children.
And we're all children in the eyes of God.
We're all children in the eyes of God.
Right now, we're like biological factors. Okay. Fasting for the adults.
So the children come offer a flower and then take a cookie from Srila Prabhupada. Offer the flowers to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada and take a cookie. Okay, so now we'll say a translation of the song. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, I know the way of the I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. I disgrace my constellation with your suffering, and of pain and of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified with the words emanate from the lotus mouth. Attachment with lotus feet is the perfection of the lotus house. You know what's our dark eyes, He fills our heart with transcendental knowledge. He is our Lord, birth after birth. From His ecstatic radiance, my image is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of His character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, friend of the poor, and Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, merciful to us, give us a shade of your feet. Your fame is spread all over the world. We take shelter of that lotus feet. His Divine Grace, A.C Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma 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 Mando Moe Savadana Mate
Jayam, Jayam Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Hariprabhupada, Srimad, Abhaya Charanandam, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai Srila Vishnupad, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki, Puri Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki, Nimsikaho Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki, Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinatha, Shyamsakhi Radhadesh, Giri Govardhan ki, Rajabhumi Vrindavan ki, every Mayapodam ki, Param Vijaya Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki, His Divine Grace, A.C Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki, Radhadesh Ram ki, Shri Gaurani Tai ki, Shri Jagannath Baladev Devi Subhadra Maharani ki, Shri Lalita Vishaka Devi, Shri Radha Gopinath ki, Nita Gaura Prabhu. All glories to the Seven Days. All glories to the Seven Days. All glories to the Seven Days. All glories to Shri Guru, Shri
due to the separation from the Lord and his associates. I can just read it? So we'll read the translation.
We'll read the translation first, and we can meditate because we are not Bengali speakers, most of us. Maybe some, but most of us are not. So it's nice to read the translation. The first verse says, "He who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a personality as Srinivasacharya gone? Where are my Swarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishna Das Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into the fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps."
So I wanted to start with the announcement that I heard one devotee mentioned that they woke up in the middle of the night around the 14th of November in 77 because a big neem tree in Mayapur crashed, and there was a big cyclone that was raging all over India, and it was just after Prabhupada left the planet, 14th of November 1977. So when I heard that, I went to look it up, as we can do nowadays. I googled the 14th of November 1977, and yes, there was a huge cyclone that raged over the whole of India, especially Andhra Pradesh. Lots of casualties, lots of, and it's very inauspicious for your devotee to leave the planet. So now it's the 11th of November, and it's the amnesty, the end of the First World War. And they're celebrating this all over Belgium, especially. Apparently, so that's an auspicious day also to celebrate Prabhupada's disappearance. So Prabhupada, he gave his life. First, he prepared himself whole life to come to the West and save our life. And that reminded me of one pastime with Bhakti Swami Prabhupada was alone on the roof of Mayapur building with Bhakti Swami, and he was asking him very emphatically, right? To please give one lifetime to Krishna's service. You have had so many billions, millions and billions of lifetimes, all in the service of sense gratification. So now give one lifetime to Krishna and see what happens. Even if it's not successful, you will still have billions and billions of lifetimes after this. So just try and give one lifetime to Krishna, and you see what happens. And I was told that Bhakti Swami took this very seriously. We should follow in his footsteps, I think. So then I just wanted to start with the first. I have Shamananda, we had a little meeting, and just before the meeting, actually, this bathing ceremony came came just out of the blue. Prabhupada inspired me, I think, because I was 11 o'clock for the meeting and it was a little late. So I wandered into Prabhupada's room. I saw Prabhupada's footprints and this little gully in front. I was saying, wow, this is actually meant for bathing. So we were planning a Pushpanjali like we always do. And I thought about maybe, especially Gaurvani, she's doing one for the children for his birthday, for Dauji's birthday. And I thought we should do one also and we can bathe Prabhupada's feet. So Prabhupada, I think he inspired me to wander up to his feet and get inspired. So then he also told me, he said, so this time you're the only one, no sister next to you. Like in Vyasa Puja we could do it together, now I'm the only one to sit here. So I said, I have a plan, I have a few god sisters here and there, and I want to share their memories and I have their support. So I wanted to start with Mula Prakriti. She has been visiting here in the 90s. She helped us very much with community spirit, teaching us about confidentiality, no judgmentalism, compassion to each other. So she had been going to visit all the different Vaishnavas that were involved in Srila Prabhupada's life before he came to the West. And I wanted to share one memory of one devotee that she met who was a resident of Radha temple. He's been living in that same room all his life, from little boy to now he's a very old man, Vaishnava, and he met Prabhupada when Prabhupada was residing at Radha temple and translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's coming up now.
So, how long?
Just that one past.
Just very
It's 10 minutes, about 5 or even 6, I think.
Okay, so this
From 34 till the end. Yeah. Just the memories of this one devotee.
So this was told to us by an old gentleman, Vaishnav, who lives just a couple of doors down from Radha Damodar in one of those houses that front on the back. They kind of close in on the back of Rupa Goswami Samadhi area. His name is Hridayananda Das Babaji, and we found him because the devotee who takes care of Srila Prabhupada's rooms, I asked him to keep an eye out, and he said this old man used to come all the time and cry in front of Prabhupada's murti there. And so we followed him home, and we found out, so we asked him, his room was just completely cluttered and full of books, Krishna conscious books, and when we asked him if he had any memories that he could tell us about Srila Prabhupada, he immediately began to weep, just like a baby, just weeping. And then he said, he goes, I've lived in Vrindavan. He says, I'm like 89 years old or something. I've lived in Vrindavan my whole life, and never, ever in my whole years that I've lived here have I seen anyone do sadhana like him. He said, and when I found out that Nityananda Prabhu had chosen him to go and break open the storehouse of love of God in the world, he goes, I wasn't at all surprised. So we said, well, what were those memories? What do you remember? He had a few memories. And the first one was, he said, he used to live in that room, and he always lived in that same room. He never moved from that room. And he said he knew that Srila Prabhupada lived nearby him, and he always saw him going in and out of Radha Damodar and saw him going on Parikrama around Vrindavan, but he was very grave. Prabhupada was very grave, he said, and very not social. Just started walking and chanting, and he said even when he used to go to Radha Damodar sometimes to do Parikrama, Srila Prabhupada would be either on the veranda there or in his rooms just writing and chanting, and he never wanted to disturb him. So he knew who he was, but did never spoken with him or anything. And he noticed that some evenings in the middle of the night, not evening, but in the middle of the night, he would hear this voice coming from the courtyard of Rupa Goswami Samadhi. And it would be like a crying voice calling out, kind of, in this very pathetic tone. And it would go for quite a while in the night. But he said he was usually sleeping and he didn't go to investigate what it was. And he heard it quite regularly. And then he said one night, he heard that again, and it was a full moon, and he wasn't that sleepy, and he decided to go up the stairs and go up to the roof. And so he was standing on the roof in the middle of the night, and he was looking down into the courtyard. And what he saw by Rupa Goswami's Bhajan Kutir and Samadhi was, he saw our Srila Prabhupada, and he was bending down in front of the Samadhi, and he had a broom, like a broom made out of straw. And he was sweeping there in that courtyard, and as he was sweeping, he was crying, and he was calling out, "Hey Gurudev, hey Gurudev, give me your mercy, give me your mercy. Hey Rup, hey Sanatan, give me your mercy, please give me your mercy. Without your mercy, how can I do what you have asked me to do?" And he said then he realized that all those times that he had heard that in the middle of the night, that was our Srila Prabhupada performing one aspect of his sadhana there, in that very special place for him. And then he took...
There's much more nectar. This is a good for the mood, how Prabhupada was preparing himself to come to save us. And when Prabhupada actually came to the West, there was one of the mothers of one of the devotees in America. She was very favorable. She started a whole movement for the parents of devotees to support the movement. So she was asking Prabhupada, why didn't you come earlier? And then Prabhupada said, you were simply not ready. So actually Prabhupada was waiting for us to get ready, and Prabhupada was meanwhile preparing himself and praying for the mercy of the spiritual master and all the devotees, Lord Chaitanya, to be successful in his mission. But then when Prabhupada came, no one could escape his mercy. And that is the next clip. It's from Rachitambara. I met her in Mayapur when she was teaching the Gurukul there. But she'd been situated in Los Angeles and India. We were very nice Vaishnavi. So she's telling the story how she met Srila Prabhupada. It's called No One Could Escape.
He said, call him in here.
Thank you so much for doing all this.
The first time I saw Srila Prabhupada was in the LA airport. I think it must have been about 200 devotees went to greet him. There were a huge crowd and a loud kirtan, and everyone was pushing forward. And there was a space above the partition where the passengers were coming out, and you were able to see it was a tall person. I remember Stetson hat came by and something else came by, and then we could understand, is that, no, that's not Prabhupada. And we kept pushing forward more and more, and the kirtan was bigger and bigger. And then I felt someone pushing behind me, and I thought, that's odd because I'm at the back of the crowd. I was a very near devotee. So then I turned to look, and there were two businessmen behind me, sort of mid-20s, you know, suits and briefcases and everything else, but they were looking and looking to see who we were waiting for. Then suddenly we saw a danda raised above the partition, and we knew, oh, Prabhupada must be coming. So then Prabhupada came out, and we all paid our obeisances, and there was the most amazing feeling of like a tidal wave rushing through me from the very depths of my being and pouring out, and I just cried and cried and cried. And then finally when I stood up to go and follow the devotees who were following Srila Prabhupada, I turned and these two businessmen were standing there with tears pouring down their faces. It was such an amazing experience to see how they were touched just by a moment's association with Srila Prabhupada.
Bill's time.
So I wanted to tell us a story about one devotee called Tranakarta. And when he was a young boy, he was very much into Jesus Christ, Lord Jesus. And his parents were Italian, they were religious. So he was always praying to Lord Jesus. But when he was getting a little older, he couldn't find the answers to his questions. So he wanted, please Jesus, who is your father? How do I serve you? So then he was 17 years old, he wanted to go, he couldn't find his way. Like, I don't know if we would recognize this. It's like before we met Krishna consciousness, it's like we were lost in a world, like a strange world, and we feel strangers in this world. So this young boy, 17 years old, was lost. He thought, well, maybe I should just join the army. His parents were all in the Marine. But then his father said, don't go, please, I don't want to lose my son to a war that is fought for politics. It's no use. So please don't go to the army. So then he decided he will go in the forest. He got himself a tent and he just moved into the forest in Chicago somewhere. And he was living there with his dog. He had a dog that was his best friend. He said, because he never answered, so he had to listen. He never spoke, and the dog doesn't speak, so he just listens. And so they were hiking in the forest, him and his dog, deep in the forest, no one around. And so he sat down next to a tree, just having a rest, and his dog was a little bit further, scraping next to a tree and moving around. It's like, oh, he thought maybe there's a rabbit or a rabbit hole or something. So he went to see what it was. And so while he was sitting there at the trees praying, please Jesus, show me your father, show me who you are. And then he went to see his dog, what he was up to. And he looked right into Prabhupada's face. There was a Krishna book lying under the tree, at the foot of the tree, in the middle of the forest. So he picked up the book. It was completely not soiled or anything. He turned it around, and he says, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he got his answer. He was completely not dirty, not wet, it's completely new. He said still he doesn't know where this Krishna book came from in the middle of the forest. So from there on he went, then he couldn't read it so much. He was trying to read it, but George Harrison has his introduction, prologue in it, and that he could understand, because George Harrison said we're all looking for Krishna. Some know it and some don't know it, but we're all looking for Krishna. And you chant Hare Krishna, and the proof of the pudding is in tasting it. And it said the Hare Krishna mantra. So that was convincing him. So from then on, he started to chant Hare Krishna. He was chanting Hare Krishna, because he didn't realize you have to say the E. So that he was doing that for 6 months until he met somebody who met the devotees, and then from there on. And what you can imagine what he became and what his service was, book distribution. He moved to New Vrindavan because he didn't want to part with his dog. So he knew, they told him, your dog can be the guard dog in the New Vrindavan, but as soon as his dog passed on, he said, actually, I just want to do book distribution. And he's been doing book distribution all his life. So I thought it was such an amazing how Krishna, he finds us in so many different ways, even in the middle of the forest. You just have to pray. So then this goes to the next one of Rachitambara. She's called
LA from 73 till 76. And whenever Srila Prabhupada was visiting, I would rise very early, sometimes at 1 o'clock, 1:30 was normal, and I would go behind the temple. And there was an alleyway behind the LA temple. There was a laundromat that the devotees used, and it was dark and creepy at night. But anyhow, I went there, and standing behind the temple, you could look up at Srila Prabhupada's quarters, his darshan room window, and he was always there, no matter how early I got up. He was always already sitting there, and sometimes I could hear him softly chanting japa. It's mostly somewhere there, and the windows were open, or quite often I would hear him translating. And I would chant my japa softly down there and think that I was protecting Srila Prabhupada because it was a dark alley and he was silhouetted in the window. You could see him, and I was always afraid someone would come. You know, it was the time of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and these people had been shot. So I used to get up early and chant there and protect Prabhupada. But it was nice because I felt like it was a little time with him. I could hear him translating or hear him chanting.
Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives in this connection a description of difference of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and ordinary living being.
The first time? So, whenever we hear memories, and I remember my own memory, when I met Prabhupada first, there was an immediate recognition. I felt very strongly, I finally found my father. Although my father was a very protected person, he tried to protect me from whatever mischief I was getting up to. But the real protection I couldn't feel from him. It was very skin deep. But when I met Prabhupada, when I saw Prabhupada first, then I felt that strong connection that Prabhupada was there and he was actually going to save me, and he was my real father, and I came home. And so many devotees, whoever you hear, met Prabhupada's books, they felt like coming home and recognizing their spiritual master. So, when I was in New Mayapur, Prabhupada, he gave a lecture, and one devotee, he asked the question that Prabhupada, we pray every morning for Guru Puja, that you are our spiritual master, life after life. And he said, so does that mean that when we don't make it this lifetime, will you come back to save us? And then Prabhupada banged on the little table in front of him. He said, don't make me come back. You make it this lifetime. But now I was thinking, why is this recognition? Maybe already Prabhupada came back to save us. Because every devotee, this devotee, he saw the Prabhupada's face in the Krishna book. He was praying to Jesus. And he says, as soon as I saw Prabhupada's face, he knows he's my spiritual master. So I'm thinking, maybe Prabhupada already been coming back to save us before. And we are, this time, Prabhupada said, there is no excuse. I have given you everything. The holy name, Krishna Prasad, the deity worship, the Guru Puja, the process, the books. So we have no reason not to make it this lifetime. So that would be nice responsibility to take on our heads to make it this lifetime. Maybe all these other lifetimes we didn't somehow make it all the way, and now we can try again and give this next lifetime again to Krishna. And then there's a fourth very nice memory of Rachitambara and her husband. They were doing some very wonderful service for Prabhupada.
And Chaitanya Seva, he had been working in the building of the LA temple, and then it was finished. And then one day Srila Prabhupada called him up to his quarters, and he said, "We've purchased a 13-story building in New York." And he was explaining to my husband that it was an old nursing home, and it was just a very old, broken down building. And the whole bottom floor needed to be gutted and made into a temple room, and all of the floors had to be repainted and scraped and sanded, and it was just a tremendous amount of work. And he was asking my husband how long that would take. So my husband was just working it all out, and he was about to open his mouth to say, possibly we could do it within a year. But just before he got that out, Srila Prabhupada looked at him and smiled, and he said, "I'm due to be in New York in 6 weeks." And the next thing I knew, my husband came home and said, "Pat, we're moving to New York in the morning." And we did. And we started work immediately. And honestly, in the 6 weeks, I don't remember sleeping. I guess we must have. It was a 24-hour marathon for 6 weeks. And we did it. I don't know how it manifested, only by Prabhupada's mercy. But then there's a sweet little end to this. Is when Srila Prabhupada was arriving, we were lining the walk from the front door to the car, and everybody was standing there with beautiful gifts and so many things to offer to Srila Prabhupada. And then I saw my husband come rushing out from doing the last minute things, and I could see him looking. Everybody had something to give Srila Prabhupada, and he felt he had nothing. So he rushed back in, and he went into the Pujari area, the flower room. But every last flower had been used, and all he could find was one rose kind of dead and black, and so he just grabbed it and ran back out. He was holding that, and then Srila Prabhupada came out of his car, and he just kind of floated along, swan-like, you know, and everyone was giving him gifts, and his arms would pile up, and then he'd hand them back to his servant. And then my husband was watching all these gifts, and finally he just put this old rotten rose behind his back. And Srila Prabhupada was just looking straight ahead the whole time. And then he came to my husband, and he just stopped. And he held his hand out. And my husband didn't do anything for a minute, and Prabhupada moved his hand, like, "Give it to me." And so he brought this old wilted rose out from behind his back and put it in Srila Prabhupada's hand. And Prabhupada held the rose between his two hands in a pranam and turned to my husband and said, "Thank you very much." He is just such an amazing soul. The most wonderful thing about Srila Prabhupada is he just knew everything. He just knew your heart.
It reminded me immediately of another pastime with Krishna and Sudha, right? With his little bag of chipped rice that he didn't want to offer to Krishna. So, and also, when Prabhupada was, just before leaving the body, he was lying on his bed in Vrindavan and not able to travel anymore. And some devotees came to see him from New York. And Prabhupada was asking about the preaching in New York. How's it going? How's the preaching going? So they were giving him a really nice report about all the activities, all the preaching activities that were going on in New York. And Prabhupada was asking more and more questions about what's going on and how is the preaching going. And Prabhupada became so enlivened that he said, "Actually, you should just take me there. Take me right now. I want to go preach in New York. Here I'm just lying, wasting my life. The body is not functioning anymore. Just take me to New York. I want to die in the field. And if I die in New York, you put the my tomb on the roof of the building. And I want to die like Arjuna in the field. So that was his wish. Of course, devotees would grant his wishes. Prabhupada also wanted to go to Govardhan. And actually, there was a story of he asked one devotee to sing for him. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Govardhan. And while singing, he said, then I will do parikrama. And just close his eyes, and the devotee was singing, and Prabhupada would go do parikrama around Vrindavan in his mind. So, I was also thinking how amazing it is that, I don't know, maybe that's the reason why Prabhupada preached, or the devotees, the younger generation in America took to Krishna consciousness, because they were fed up with the rules and regulations. They wanted to expand their consciousness, and they tried all the artificial ways until Prabhupada came. Because in one sense, God, like a little baby, blue baby, with stealing the butter and feeding it to the monkeys, or a half lion, half man incarnation, or Varaha, the boar who picks up the earth. How come we just immediately accepted that? Never a question in our mind. These are very foreign things for a Western person, Western mind, but because we are so fed up with this so-called culture, Western rational way of life, that for us it was, I think recognition, this was for us no problem at all. Nobody had a problem. No, you had a problem with Krishna being a little blue boy and eating butter? No, he was God. Prabhupada said, so it was no problem. And so from there we want to go to this, why we did cookies today, because usually in Radhadesh we have not done, Prabhupada wasn't here, and we have not distributed cookies, but Prabhupada was very much fond of the children, always fond of the children. There was even a little boy in Australia who would know his way. At that time there was guards at the doors. But this little boy who would climb in from the window and then he would sit all day with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada would take rest, and he would take rest under his bed. And somehow he'd always escape the guards. The guards had no idea that this little boy was spending all his day with Srila Prabhupada. So then she tells, Rachitambra tells a story about her service, that one of her only services to Srila Prabhupada was making the cookies for the children. And then she will tell the story, how that went this one time.
One time, Rameshwar, Prabhu called us all into the temple room for an emergency ISKCON one evening and told us that Srila Prabhupada was in Hawaii, but he was very, very ill. And he was coming to Los Angeles that night, but no one should go to the airport and greet him. We should be very quiet around the temple, and no one should try to ask for darshans or anything like that. Prabhupada was ill and he was coming to rest. We wouldn't see him at all. So at the end he asked for questions, and my only service to Srila Prabhupada, direct service, was to make these cookies that he gave out to the children. So I raised my hand and asked, well, should I make the cookies? And he immediately said, cookies? I've just been telling everybody that Srila Prabhupada's so ill. You think Prabhupada's going to give cookies to the children? And I just felt so bad. So then I went home and I was crying like anything, telling my husband, but it's my only service to Srila Prabhupada. And I guess to pacify him, he said, never mind, service is absolute. So you go ahead and make the cookies and bring them over, just as you usually do, bring them to Guru Puja. And later you could offer them to a picture of Srila Prabhupada and distribute them in the playground to the children. So that pacified me. The next morning I got up early and I very carefully made the cookies. And I set them out in a beautiful silver plate. And I brought them over and tucked them behind the dasa. And nobody expected Srila Prabhupada to show up for Guru Puja. We knew he had arrived in the night, but we knew he was very ill. And just before the curtains were to open, suddenly the door to Srila Prabhupada's quarters opened, and there was Srila Prabhupada, looking so ill, and he was being held up by two people. And the curtains open and they laid him down to pay full dandavats in front of Shishipani Tat. Then they had to pick him up again. He was so weak, and they helped him again in front of Rukmini Dwarkadish and laid him down again, up and again in front of Lord Jagannath. And by that time they were back at his door, go back to his quarters. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, there should be Guru Puja. And so they helped him up to his Vyasasana. And so we had a very short Guru Puja. And then they climbed up to help him down, and Srila Prabhupada said, no, there should be class. And so then Srila Prabhupada gave class, and I remember that even though he was speaking into the microphone, you could hardly hear him because he was so weak, and he was sitting with his head, all like fallen forward. He was so weak. So then again, after a short class, they went to help him down again, and Srila Prabhupada said very audibly into the microphone, no, where are the cookies? The children are waiting for their cookies. And I went, oh, I got the cookies. And I brought the cookies. I was so happy. Srila Prabhupada remembered the children. He was so ill, but he had that heart for the children. And ill as he was, he waited till every last child, he'd given each one personally a cookie. And then he broke up the rest. By that time there was a huge kirtan, and he threw the rest of the cookies over out into the crowd and all the dancing brahmacharis, and everybody just went wild.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. That reminds me also of a memory that I had when I was in Bhaktivedanta Manor. Srila Prabhupada was there in 77, August 77. I was there also with my daughter. My husband was at the time getting treatment for, my first husband, getting treatment for his cancer. So we were there, sitting, and at that time there was only darshan of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada wasn't distraction there. So Prabhupada wasn't speaking anymore. There was no class. But Prabhupada would go in front of, they would take Prabhupada in a chair in front of the deities, like at this time, in front of the deities, and then they would take Prabhupada to his Vyasasana. And after that, he would just sit and we would have kirtan. And all the devotees, it was actually very beautiful, because usually when you listen, when Prabhupada is on the Vyasasana, we listen to Prabhupada. And this time we were having darshan of Srila Prabhupada, so we were gazing at his lotus face, his lotus feet. His lotus feet were so beautiful. They were a little bit, because of his difficulties, his illness, the feet were a little bit swollen, but they were so soft and beautiful, like baby feet, actually. So beautiful. And then Prabhupada would sit, and I had my daughter, not this one, but the other, the bigger, Rupa Manjari. She was sitting on my lap. She was 1.5, I think, 1.5. And she would go with the kirtan, and the kirtan was going, so she would be jumping up and down on my lap. So every time she would go with her face in front of my face, or jumping like this. And I was trying to gaze at Srila Prabhupada. I was getting a little annoyed by this. So I took her by the arms, and I put her down a little forceful. And I looked again very eagerly at Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, he looked straight at me with a very stern face. And this is not the way you treat your child for your own satisfaction, to get the mercy, and you're putting down your child. So I felt immediately like a personal instruction. Okay, look, we are here to facilitate our children towards Krishna, and not here for our own satisfaction. Basically, so it was a. And then later you'd start to, the mind comes back, and you think, oh, maybe I just imagined, or. But many devotees you could hear in the hallway, they were sharing their experience. They were saying, oh, Prabhupada, he was looking at me, I had contact. Prabhupada actually had contact with every single devotee in the temple at that time, and hearing the memories nowadays, you can hear so many times one devotee sitting all the way in the back, and Prabhupada is instructing him just by a gaze or a look. He knows exactly what to say to each devotee. One devotee who was Guru Kripa, he never saw Prabhupada before. And Prabhupada came out of the airport, out of the gate, and he walked straight through all the devotees, right